Hello, and welcome to my sociology podcast. Today, I'm going to be getting into the Black and gay male depictions in media and intersectional outlook. So first, we're going to start with hegemonic masculinity. Hegemonic masculinity is how a lot of men are raised to hold certain values and to attain certain values. Some sociologists define this under 4 rules. Less rules, more so guidelines under hegemonic masculinity. The first one being reject anything feminine. So that is seen as, you're a boy, you like blue toys. You don't like pink toys or Barbies. The second one being prioritize wealth and materialism. Today, that's kind of seen as this workaholic type of mentality over personal joys, like going for a walk or having kind of hobbies that seem useless, almost under hegemonic masculinity. And the third one being show no emotion, which is a big one, often in movies, which is what I'm talking about today in this podcast and media. The men are usually told to be a sturdy oak or to be a shoulder that the woman can cry on, never needing that shoulder to cry on. And then the fourth guideline being be dominant, meaning in every area, be aggressive, be competitive, be assertive, being confident. So all 4 of these guidelines, they all have a certain homophobic slant to them, because being gay is seen as the antithesis, the exact opposite, almost, of what it means to be masculine, of what it means to be a man. So masculinity is, as we know, not only policed just by femininity, as masculine is basically being or having traits that are the opposite of feminine, but it is also being policed by homophobia. So in the day-to-day life, but also in media specifically, it's seen as parents telling their children, boys don't cry. Or when they go to school, they're getting bullied for saying, for doing anything like, oh, what you're doing is too feminine, or being called the F slur, things like that. So masculinity that I'm looking at today, we're looking at the policing in a homophobic way of masculinity. And then getting into the intersection of what it means to be Black, a man, and gay. It is a lot to go through. But all men basically are expected to follow those 4 rules that I just laid out, even though they are narrow and rigid on essentially how to be a man. And again, they're policed by their parents, their father figures, and by both boys and girls at their school or just in their community and society. Don't do that, do this. That's not how you be a man. Do this to be a man. Man up. Things like that. And queer men specifically are not immune to this. They are not immune to hegemonic masculinity. In fact, many of them do try to fit into this strict gender role or gender expectation. But even though there was this like this want to fit in to masculinity, they will always be seen as othered. Once it is found out that they are queer or gay or bisexual. So I'm using gay in this form as an umbrella term, like LGBTQ, umbrella term for basically liking the same sex. So basically, these queer men will always be seen as othered, no matter how masculine they're presenting. So that gets into my first example in TV shows and movies, where the jock football player that is often portrayed as the biggest and the strongest and the one that everyone else on the team looks up to and looks at as this ideal man, often in like of course, like the high school setting, in movies and TV shows. But then when it is discovered that they do like men, that they do like the same sex, there is an immediate tonal shift to where even though they're still big and strong and can be aggressive, they are seen as less than, and they are immediately seen as othered. And so masculinity is almost this unachievable goal or ideal, even if that means that no one can reach it, or that very few men can reach it. Because as soon as you do something such as liking the same sex puts you down, you're immediately seen as not being able to reach this ideal, again, that ideal of hegemonic masculinity. So there's also a difference when, let's say, for gay men who are never considered to be the big and strong jock, but instead the opposite of the effeminate, flamboyant, or the fashionista stereotype that you see in a lot of TV shows, especially the TV shows in the early 2000s, 90s, when, of course, you have the gay best friend, where they're always more feminine, like hyper feminine almost. They were never considered to be the ideal masculine or near the ideal masculine. And that's for gay men in general. But then getting to the intersection that I'm looking at for Black and gay men, including that Black race, there's an added layer of what it means to be masculine, because within the Black community, there seems to be this added phenomenon that some like to call the Black aesthetic, which embodies the traits of hegemonic masculinity still, but there is this added shift due to the race, and that's because in the Black community, there are specific traits associated with what it means to be a man. It is almost hyper masculine in some ways, especially in the US, where they need to be more aggressive, stronger, dominant. Again, all of these traits are of masculinity, but again, there is a certain shift when it's a Black man compared to a white man. It is, again, this hyper masculinity that's almost more intensive, and so sorry, and even under this Black aesthetic that I'm calling it, when you are a Black gay man, you are being policed even more harshly than your white counterparts for this reason, because the threshold of masculinity is almost greater for them because they are Black. So because there's this greater a goal of this hypermasculinity, it is more appalling, more shocking, and looked down upon by straight people or heterosexual people, especially those within the Black community, when it is found out that someone in the Black community is gay, especially gay men, because of this higher threshold that they're supposed to be reaching for masculinity. And also because just within the Black community, masculinity is considered an integral part of the community. And I feel like to fully understand the reasons behind the hypermasculinity, it's a lot rooted within the history. Again, I think more research kind of needs to be done on this. But from what I understand is that about 50 years ago, 100 years ago, post-slavery, when a Black man, previous slaves, are trying to get into the workforce, you needed to portray these hyper-masculine traits of, again, strength, dominance, no emotion, or willingness to get the job done. That type of gumption, that strongness, that sturdy oakness needed to be twice as strong in order to go into work and into these jobs with white counterparts who did not have to work as easily. Not saying they didn't work hard. I'm just saying that in that era, there was a need, an almost unspoken need, that you needed to work twice as hard to get the same outcome. And so thus masculinity become an integral part within the Black community, and that survived post-slavery era, and kind of still continues within the community, because again, masculinity is taught, and if that's the way that people needed to survive and provide for their families, then that's kind of how it happened within this community, specifically within the Black community. And so often in movies, when the portrayal of a Black gay man is seen, sometimes by the end of the movie, or often at the end of a movie, there are one of two things. Either their masculinity will win, where it's like their masculine traits have kind of become at the forefront as seen as more accepting, or it's found out that their masculinity or their toughness was used as a facade, almost as a mask used by these Black gay men in order to hide their true identity as gay. Even if the audience may know that they are gay, they are still hyper masculine, super tough, very dominant, very assertive, even if that comes with negative stereotypes, again, against black gay men, because Black men just in general, even if they're heterosexual, face these negative stereotypes of being hyper aggressive. But even though that is a negative stereotype, it is still an ideal seen by a lot of men to portray, because being a aggressive man, even in a negative connotation, is better than being seen as feminine, is better than being seen as gay or weak. All of those ideas or traits are seen as synonymous: weak, feminine, gay. It's ingrained, it's learned, and it's taught socially. And so again, in media, we see this sometimes as masculinity being used as a mask. So going back to the idea of our jock football player from earlier, often it isn't until the end of the movie that they may confide in a character and drop their mask of masculinity to show a more feminine side, such as just showing emotions of how they really feel, or showing their diverse interests or hobbies sometimes, or maybe just dropping that outer layer of macho masculinity, of aggressiveness, of assertiveness, that was used in order to not be devalued, again, as being seen as feminine or weak, or less than. And so under this, a lot of Black gay men in movies are left to either be seen as feminine or be nothing less than hyper masculine. It's not enough to just be masculine and portray those traits. There has to be hyper masculinity, or else you're seen as feminine. It's like one drop. I don't know if this is a bad example, but like one drop of blood in the water ruins it all. That is kind of how being gay or being feminine is seen for men, especially in movies, where stereotypes are very common. It is nothing less in movies. I don't think I said that right. You have to be basically nothing less than hyper masculine, if you understand what I'm saying, in order to be portrayed as this ideal man that isn't weak or isn't less than. And then maybe, possibly, your queerness can be accepted because you are portraying so heavily these masculine ideal traits. And so basically, to wrap it up, the significance on viewing the intersectionality of both being Black, a man, and gay helps to understand specific stereotypes, ideas, and purposes behind their depictions in TV shows and movies, which are different from Black gay women or white gay men. While similar in some aspects, there are very different implications, very different underlyings and causes. And so hopefully this sociology take will help us to better understand the inequalities, oppression, and privileges faced by certain groups, specifically Black gay men in TV shows and media. Bye.